share my screen, and then wherever I could grasp from his vast knowledge, we will run through his presentation. Just a moment. Yeah. So I hope it's visible to all.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Great. I hope this is full screen mode.
Yes, sir. Sir, full screen, full screen.
Great. So, as Dr. S.A. Khanduri Saab could not be present here physically, or I would say virtually, we will be benefited from his presentation, and there is a write-up as well, so which will make all of us easy. His message is all about forest and wildlife sector policy, environment for sustainable management of biodiversity. So let us look at the global approach. Of course, as we all know, and we have also studied in our schooling, that it all started way back in 1972, in the Stockholm, where, the entire thing happened, followed by 1992, Rio de Janeiro and Johannesburg in 2002. Several multilateral alignments, treaties, made into force. For example, Agenda 21, MDGs and Sustainable Development Goals, CITES, FAO Committee on Forestry, ITTO, FLEGT and Forest Certification came into existence. Of course, UNFCCC and CBD, the IG targets, which brief all about the global approach towards the biodiversity and forest and wildlife conservation at the global level. If you would look at the civil society's involvement, we fairly have very good amount of organizations, non-governmental organizations working all across at the world level, and as well as in country at the national level. For example, IUCN, WWF, and Traffic, WCS, IFA, WTI, BNHS, A3, CSE, and Aranya. So these are the civil society involvement towards the biodiversity and wildlife conservation in the country. So coming to the policy and laws in the Indian context, of course, there was, national forest policies of 1894, 1952, 1988, and the Act at its original format came into existence in 1927, also known as the State Forest Acts. Then, of course, as we all know, the Wildlife Protection Act came into existence and passed by the government in the Parliament in 1972. The 42nd yes Constitutional Amendment in 1976, Forest Conservation Act 1980, Environment Protection Act 1986, and of course the Biological Diversity Act 2002, and followed by the National Environment Policy, which came into force in 2006. So if you would look at in a nutshell, we do have a fairly good amount of legislation and laws in place in the form of various policies and acts in the Indian context towards the forest, biodiversity, and wildlife conservation in the country. Implementation, the management models, of course, forest, reserve forest, protected forest, unclassed and deemed forest, we do have, at the management models in India. Protected areas that appears to be updated, and it has been updated recently by the Ministry and the Wildlife Institute of India, that we do have fairly a good amount of network, and more than, if I'm not wrong, more than 5% total geographic area of the country do come in the form of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserve, community reserve, tiger reserves, and elephant reserves. Of course, we do have the ecologically sensitive zones around the protected areas, which, of course, called as the ESZ, or ecologically sensitive zones. We have around 18 biosphere reserves under Man and Biosphere Program, which is popularly called as the MAB of the UNESCO initially. Of course, we have the World Natural Heritage, because India is also popularly known for the biodiversity hotspot, one of the biodiversity hotspot in the world under the UNESCO World Heritage Committee. Then, of course, we have the biodiversity heritage sites, around 20 plus 22 under Biological Diversity Act in the country, and of course the CRGI under EPA. So policy direction, the institutions framework, we do have a planning commission, the Niti Aayog, which is now called as National Finance Commission, currently the 15th one, the Ministry of EF&CC, ICFRE, FSI, Wildlife of India, Forest Academies, IIFM in Bhopal. Then regulatory arms of the government are FCA, EPA, and WPA. Advisory panels, of course, as you know, Forest Advisory Committee, Regional Empowered Committee, National Board of Wildlife, State Board of Wildlife, and State Biodiversity boards in place for various commitments and various decisions to be taken by the various advisory panels at the state and at the central level. The CAMPA Authority, the National Tiger Conservation Authority, or the NTCA, the NBA, National Biodiversity Authority, the NGT or the National Green Tribunal are also fairly good amount of network at the country level. Then funding models, because obviously we need resources to mobilize all these panels and various activities at the state and the central level. So we have central government budgets at the centrally sponsored or the CSS routes, through which the various funding gets mobilized, the resources get mobilized for various activities. The state government budget, plan, and of course non-plan, as we all know, of forest and other sectors. National finance committees, and with the special grants which they provide for various projects and programs. Externally aided projects, of course, as we know that GIZ, JBIC, and World Bank, and etc. Other overseas and the foreign funding also get involved and providing contributions towards the conservation and protection of the natural resources in our country. Then global environmental instrument like GEF and GCF also providing the funding and resources for various projects and programs. Special instruments like CAMPA and MNRGGS and GIM are also some of the examples in this overall funding model. So important mechanisms are the concurrent subjects is the central oversight, working management plans for sustainable management, species recovery programs, because we have been involved in a few species recovery programs as well. For example, Project Tiger, Project Elephant, Action on Snow Leopard, for which I do remember, Khanduri Saab was at the ministry level when he was the Inspector General, was very instrumental for formalizing it. The Great Indian Bustard, Vulture Recovery Program, Gangetic Dolphin, Wild Water Buffalo, and so on, of course, including the Asiatic lion as well. Complete ban on hunting and trade of scheduled wildlife species in the country, the illegal trade, what we call it. So, curbing the illegal trade will the help of the central bodies like Wildlife Crime Control Bureau and other associated organizations and non-governmental organizations like traffic, people's participation in core of forest and wildlife management, biodiversity management committee in local bodies, and consultation of communities obligatory for modification of forest rights. So these are some of the important mechanisms in place at the country level. Coming to the the legislation which we saw in Khanduri Saab presentation in the initial slides, the National Environment Policy in 2006. The dominant theme of this policy is that while conservation and environment resources is necessary to secure livelihood and well-being of all, the most secure basis for conservation is to ensure that people dependent on particular resources obtain better livelihoods from the fact of conservation than from degradation of the resources. What are the modalities here? At the forests, inventory limited to tree species, economically important. Ecological aspects not part of planning. Natural forest management limited to the production areas. Conservation is stopped, but plantation is degraded. Forest communities. Forest continues, sorry. Plantation management, investment limited. Species specific monitoring absent. Wildlife areas, what we do have the modalities here. Ecological concepts are missing. Biodiversity focus limited to census of major wildlife, as we all know. Tourism management overtakes habitat priorities. Community participation is a challenge, of course. ESZ, or the eco-sensitive zones, is still, an emerging concept. We do have some challenges here, that state of fragmentation, habitat degradation, impact of, on the biodiversity as one of the major challenge we have here. Then forest productivity efforts for augmentation, is really lacking. Then forest rights mismatch in concept and ground reality. So that needs to be, settled down. Settlement of rights and various enforcement levels. Private investment issued and the scopes are like priority sectors, incompatible with conservation. Long-term arrangement unattractive. And of course, the private forestry, regulatory restrictive. So with these words, I think, I just, read the entire presentation, what Khanduri Saab shared with us, but I'm sure there might be a lot of questions and, other things which I may not be the right person to address, because this is what I could do on